Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is WeatherBrains episode number 668. This is the pre-show. This is for Tuesday, the 6th of November. We are typically on the air Monday nights, but this week we're on the air Tuesday night. It's a Tuesday night special. We had some active severe weather down here in Dixie Alley last night, so we were tied up doing weather coverage, so we had to bump the show to Tuesday. So this also happens to be election day, so maybe people will watch tonight that are tired of politics. They've seen enough. They came over here to get away. We promise this is a political free zone here, so not so sure who's going to be on with us tonight. Typically on these eyeball nights like this, we have a skeleton crew. Maybe it's just me. Maybe I'll be ranting and raving for 2 hours. I know that Bill Murray, who typically does the interview segment, he is out tonight. The lovely Aubrey should be here because I think she is handling most of the interview tonight. The Accelerant, Kevin Selly, hopefully he can join us tonight. I think Rick Smith sent a note, said he probably will be out tonight. Brian Peters is on medical leave. Brian's going to be back here in a couple of weeks. We do believe he is on the verge of being back with us, and that'll be good. The man that looks like Colonel Sanders, miss having him on the show. Of course, Kim Cloco McLean has been on maternity leave, and she hopes to rejoin us before the end of the year. Of course, Nate Johnson is a world traveler. Nate is the tallest hog in the trough for the NBC O&Os, owned and operated stations. And he travels a good bit. But we'll see. We'll see who shows up here. And we have a guest. And, I'm not a good prepper guy. I'm the kind of guy that kind of looks at the show notes here about 2 minutes before we go on the air. But let's see. Do I even dare look over here? Let's take a look. We have Jen Naramore on the show tonight. So let's see if we can get her on with us. And I will throw out the invite. If nobody else shows up, it'll just be me talking to myself in the world here. All right, so I'm going to invite her. By the way, for those that don't know, this is the pre-show. This is the usual time of the program where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. I could really say some outrageous stuff tonight because last night, I was up all night long, which happens in the weather business. That's why you do this. I will never gripe about the lack of sleep. I know something bad's going to happen on the back end, probably of my life, but you don't sleep a lot in this business. So we had a situation last night that required a long night. Jen, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Awesome.
Aubrey, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Awesome. Let me just plug my headphones in so we don't get any feedback.
Just like magic, it's all working here.
The
Jen, thanks
time of year.
No, thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
No, you might not say that after this show is over. See, we advise our guests sometimes to run and call 911 while you're running.
No way, I'm excited.
We typically do this show on Monday nights, and due to some active weather, we were postponed because of weather. So many of the regulars will not be with us tonight. In fact, it might just be the three of us. So
okay,
in this case, we'll have some fun here.
That's right. We'll make them jealous. They didn't hop in.
That's right.
Yeah. I know that Bill Murray is traveling, or it's 50-cent beer night at Hooters, one of the two. It's with him. Or maybe it's Chili's. Aubrey, do they have 50-cent beer night at Chili's? Yeah, that's even better. That's even better.
How's your newsroom tonight, James? Is it full of junk food as I eat my?
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Oddly enough, I've had a weird day, so I stayed up all night last night. This was a true all-nighter where you're up all night, you do the late news, you come in and you're doing the early morning news. I mean, I was here at, for the 11 o'clock last night. I was here for the 5 o'clock this morning. And so I ran home to take a nap and get a shower and came back, and I'm slightly incoherent. But on the way back, guess what I forgot to do?
Vote.
because I totally forgot this was election day. And so at the end of the newscast this evening, I drove as fast as I could to the polling place where I vote, because where we are, we're in the central time zone, and the polls here close at 7 Central. The newscast ends at 6:30 Central. So I had to really hustle because traffic's horrible, that time of day. But I got in with 3 minutes to spare.
There you go.
So I voted, and I came straight back, and I came in here and turned on WeatherBrains. So I have not had a chance to go peruse the free food in the newsroom.
I think I've had 3 cookies tonight.
Awesome. I've seen a lot of tweets about the newsroom pizza on election night.
Did you see the Washington Post? They had like shrimp and steak tips and all sorts of stuff. So, somebody posted, and they had a whole spread.
Wow.
Making the rest of us jealous.
Yeah.
So I guess that's Jeff Bezos owns this thing, doesn't he? The Amazon guy. I guess that's what happens when he buys the Washington Post. You get lobster and shrimp, where everybody else gets the pizza's cool. I'm good with it. Look, anytime they have free food, I'm good. Whenever it is, it's
very true.
Awesome. They do a Friday night football show over there, every Friday night, and there's always free food for that. One year they had Moe's. I don't know if y'all have Moe's where you are. It's a Mexican place, and that was like awesome. But no, I'll go over there after the show tonight and see how it's going. I don't even know how this works. Whether people are disconnected, I am not. I have no understanding of what they do over there, and I've not even asked. But I'm looking at our air monitor, and it looks like they're in continuous coverage.
Oh, are they?
Typically, like I'm an ABC affiliate here, and typically they just kind of come and go, and they do the wall to wall. It's none of the cable networks, but it looks like ABC is wall to wall political right now. So I guess we do a late news. I don't. I'll be in there ready for duty, but I have no idea what to expect.
Yeah, we did. We're doing a late news, but we just didn't have our promo. We've got someone doing cut-ins at the top of every hour with updates, like local updates.
Who's having a fist fight back there in the background? Kevin, is that you in the studio there?
They're getting ready to do a cut-in here. This may be a problem. I'm by myself tonight, and they're doing cut-ins here and there. So,
well, don't they know who you are? I mean, tell them to pipe down back there.
Actually, they do. That's why they're yelling.
So you're a what? What affiliate, Kevin? I know you got a Fox. What's your main affiliate there? Is it
NBC?
NBC. So yeah, I'm watching. So they're doing the local cut-in now. I guess this is when they do the local cut-in, because they've got the governor numbers of Alabama on there. 8% of the boxers reporting. I would be horrible at doing political stuff. I would say things horribly politically incorrect.
Kind of like this show.
Yeah. I was about to say something. I'm thinking, nope. I'm not. This is a political free zone. I'm not saying it.
We are a political free zone.
Yeah. And yeah, so somebody, I'm checking to see how many write-ins I got today. So somebody took a picture of one of the write-ins they put for me, and this was for some county commission seat number 2 or something. I did well in we had a special Senate race here about a year or so ago, and I think I got almost 1,000 votes.
Wow. James, for not running.
Yeah, no, I just. What's scary? Well, I didn't even try to get
of them for people other than you.
Yeah, or dead people or something.
Right. That's pretty cool.
Nick Saban was the only one that beat me in the write-in vote. But Alabama has 67 counties, and I got votes in 59 of the 67.
Wow, that's impressive.
Or it's idiotic, one of the two.
You know what I would really, really love to see? I would love to see a one good journalist. Doesn't matter House or Senate. Doesn't have to know anything about government. would like to see them run and win and spend their entire term up there only reporting on all the nonsense that's going on up there now.
Challenge accepted.
Wouldn't that be great? I mean, just daily vlogs and videos and just spend an entire 2 years or 6 years or whatever it comes to just reporting on nonsense. Wouldn't that be awesome?
That would be beyond awesome.
I know.
If I had any journalism chops, I think I would do it.
I'm trying to eavesdrop on your reporting back there to see what they're saying.
It's just stuff.
I like our. It looks like we have a new graphics box here. I back in the old days, I would know a lot about these TV stations. Now I know absolutely nothing. But I like our graphics. They look pretty good on the air tonight. In fact, here, let me.
Yeah, the political stuff and
they took it down.
Political stuff and school closings are the last two vestiges of what they think are proprietary. And it's not. I mean, it serves no purpose to sit here and do these horse races. It's like it serves no purpose.
There's our newsman right there. He's a very attractive man. All the news anchors have to be attractive men. Call me, Alabama.
I'm currently reading. It's an old book, but did anybody read Top of the Morning about the Today Show, Good Morning America wars back in 5 years ago or something?
No, I didn't.
It's pretty interesting. It's worthwhile.
What's it called?
Top of the Morning. I believe there's actually a new television show based on that.
I did see that there's a new morning newsroom show because I think I read something that Steve Carell was coming back to TV, and it had Jennifer Aniston in it, I think, also.
Yep.
And did it say Reese Witherspoon?
Possibly.
All right, we're now 30 after the hour. Welcome to our television viewers that are watching. We can start the show. For those that have been watching our digital weather channel across parts of the Deep South, we are now on television. This is the pre-show. Everybody is here that's going to be on the show, so let's roll this sucker. We're going to start on time tonight. What is the world coming to? Here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is WeatherBrains episode number 668. You know what this is. This is the show that's all about weather. The oldest running weather podcast in the universe. We used to be the greatest. Now I don't think we're the greatest anymore. We're the oldest. Kevin, I don't know what that says. We're old. You're old. I'm old.
We can never lose that title, I suppose, unless we stop, which maybe we should consider.
I'm about to say. we often think about that. No, we started this show back in 2006. This is 18. So we are over 12 years old, and we used to be young and attractive people. Aubrey was 5 when the show started.
I'm not that young.
So Kevin, it's election night. And let me just say this for those that are listening to the podcast. We typically record this on Monday nights. This is turning into a Tuesday night special. We were bumped because of all things weather, which happens sometimes. So it's a Tuesday night special, and it happens to be election night. So I voted. Kevin, did you?
I did. This is the best night to be the weatherman.
Yeah, especially if there's no weather. We initially, last week, we didn't know the timing of this thing. We had great concern. We might have a tornado outbreak and election coverage at the same time, which can happen because down here where we are, we have a peak of tornado activity in November, December. But thankfully, the event was late last night, early this morning. So you're right. This is a great time to be a weather guy. Nobody cares. There's free food in the newsroom.
Right. And I think most of us, I mean, we all would, of course, want to be helpful, but there's literally nothing you can do. I mean, because we just don't, I don't think any of us understand any of it, do we?
I helped out 1 year, and I had like a special assignment for a and I just basically hit refresh and entered numbers, and that was it. Like I was, the old chief was here, and I didn't really have anything to do, and I was like, I can help. Give me something to do. So, but yeah, it was like just that, that data, where people just sit behind a desk and, punch numbers. That's what I did for an hour. Actually, it was only like 15 minutes because half the night you're just hitting refresh. It
just felt like an hour.
Basically.
Yeah, it's I've been doing this a long time, and it's always interesting. And they always stack these newscasts with all these live shots, and they'll come to you and say, "Can you do weather in like 15 seconds?"
Right.
Okay. So we're kind of forgotten, and nobody cares about us on this night, but. Anyway, and let me also say this, but one word of caution before we start the show. I didn't sleep last night, so longtime listeners know when I go for a long period of time with no sleep, I really tend to say some crazy things. So this might be an extra special show. I did take a nap. I went home, and it was a rough night. I'll just say we had, in my state, Alabama, we had 3 confirmed tornadoes so far. These were EF1s, but it was really rough to the north and west of here. In Tennessee, there were multiple tornadoes, and many of those were EF2s. We had 1 fatality south of Nashville and some injuries, and we also had some pretty rough tornadoes in northeastern Mississippi, including Tupelo, Mississippi. So it was a rough night last night, but yet in the way we do the overnight things, it's a lot easier to interrupt the pocket fisherman, the Ginsu knife commercials instead of Dancing with the Stars. So, and we know that if people are going to stay up all night, they won't weather, they don't want to watch the infomercials or whatever's on TV. So we just go on TV and stay on TV. So we stayed on TV for about 8 hours at the end of the late news last night until the beginning of the early morning news block. And so I went home, grabbed a shower, took a nap, and here I am. So
did you stay on straight through the morning show, or did you take a 30-minute break or something before the morning show?
Well, of course, I had 2 people in the weather office. I was here with Charles Daniel, and the way we did it, because I've got so much I have to do away from television. I've got to write a blog post. I got to do a weather extreme video. I got 24 radio stations I have to do. So I started the morning show with a couple of weather segments, and then after that, I let Charles handle the TV morning show, and I came back to the closet here and did the blog post, the weather extreme video, the radio, and everything else. So, we all wrapped up about 8 o'clock, and then that's when I went home, took a shower, took a nap, and I forgot to vote because I vote basically in my neighborhood, which is, how boneheaded is that? I totally forgot it was election day. I mean, when the way it works with me, if you stay up all night working a tornado outbreak, you take about a 1 or 2 hour nap. I wake up, I don't know where I am. I don't know why I'm there. I don't know what day it is. I don't know why I'm here. I mean, I am just totally confused. So all I knew was to go to work, and I just totally forgot to vote. So at the end of the evening news block, I ran back down there to vote because the polls here close at 7, made it with 3 minutes to spare, voted, and came back. So anyway, Aubrey, bring in our guest.
The real important question is, how many Ginsu knives did you buy?
I would like a pocket fisherman. The more I look at that commercial, I'm thinking, man,
either of those can be your show title as well. How many Ginsu knives did you buy? Or I would like a pocket fisherman.
All right, Aubrey, bring in our guest because we have much to talk about here.
All right. Well, I actually had the pleasure of meeting Jen a couple of weeks ago at the Mid-Atlantic Chaser Convention in Richmond, which I kind of touted on this show and said how great it was. So Jennifer Narramore is from the Midwest. She's originally from Indiana. Her original interest in weather started in middle school. She was living in Central Florida and became fascinated with hurricanes, as many of us do. And apparently she started tracking them on charts you would get at the grocery store. I want to know more about that. So Jennifer graduated in 1995 with a BS in meteorology from Penn State. So she is a Penn State alum. And she's also been working in radio as a broadcast meteorologist for 20 years. She started her career at the Weather Channel, but now works for the Storm Report Radio Network. And Jennifer, I believe you said you're in Ohio now.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And you also run an awesome website, which is going to be my pick of the week, called tornadotalk.com. Welcome to WeatherBrains, Jennifer Naramore.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here. I'm so excited.
So tell us a little bit about your start into weather and about these cool, apparently, things that they would give away at the grocery store in Florida, Hurricane Central.
Right. Yeah, we moved to Florida. My dad got transferred down there. He made Gatorade. He was a plant manager for the Gatorade division of the Quaker Oats Company. So we were transferred down there, and I was in middle school, and I kept watching these storms. They would get close to the coast, and then they would move north. They kept turning. I'm like, what's going on? And I just was fascinated with them. So we would go to the grocery store, and you could get the little tracking charts for free, and I would set an alarm for myself and wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning and get the coordinates from the Weather Channel so I could track everything and find out where it was going. And I remember, I think it was Hurricane Gloria. They actually canceled school and nothing happened. It was a beautiful day, a bit of a breeze, but it was one of those storms that turned. And from that point on, I was going to go to Florida State. And then we moved to Pennsylvania when I was in high school. And so I decided on Penn State, and it was just a fun time. And so from there, I transitioned and got a job in radio and been doing that for 20 years.
All right. And so tell us about your time at the Weather Channel. Did you work in radio at the Weather Channel?
For the most part, yeah. I worked there for 15 years. And for 2 years of it, I did work in a different division. But for the most part, it was radio. I started in the morning drive time slot, and then I transitioned over to afternoons eventually and did a lot of severe weather coverage. And my biggest event was the 2011 April 27th. I was on in Huntsville on WRSA there, and that just, as it's impacted many people, it was one of those events that just kind of stuck with me, more than just covering the event and trying to keep folks safe, but how could after the event, one of my coworkers, Sally, and I, we went to give supplies because it was a Tumors for Tuscaloosa was the group. So we actually went down to Auburn and gave some supplies to try to help. And that spurred in me an interest to try to help more. So I started taking some stuff with my church to try to learn how to volunteer after an event. And so I'm still hoping I can find some of those opportunities to move more with volunteer groups and stuff. But it was just one of those amazing events. But I love radio. I'm still doing it. I've been with the Storm Report now. I work from home. You're actually in my studio with me right now. And I work from home, and I've been doing that since 2012.
How does that work at the Weather Channel? Give us what's the behind the scenes on a quiet day and a busy day for one person, and how many people are in there?
For the Weather Channel, at our busiest time, we had 35 broadcasters that were dedicated to the radio only.
Wow.
We had a pretty robust department. We had set shifts, so we had probably 7 or 8 that worked from 3:30 to noon and covered the morning drive time. And then we had about 4 or 5 that worked later shifts, noon to 8, and they covered all the severe weather. We actually had overnight as well. The Weather Channel still has a radio department. It's slightly smaller at this point. And so I like being an independent contractor. I can do my own thing. I now work morning shift, afternoon shift, overnight shift. I've got all the shifts. I got a little bit more sleep than James did, but I was up this morning with a tornado watch from Murphy, North Carolina. That line was racing through, and they put a tornado watch out. So I was actually doing coverage at about 3 o'clock this morning for Murphy.
So at the Weather Channel, how many stations does one person have?
At the Weather Channel, we probably had, it was a bit more balanced. We probably had a good 20, 25. We did
Per person?
Yeah, it could really get up there and count. Now you would have live coverage as well, especially in the mornings. You would have a schedule where you just, every 5 minutes you're going live to be part of the morning show. During the afternoon, you didn't do as many lives, but you did more severe weather coverage. And so you could actually get stuck, covering a lot more for if there's a hurricane, landfall, or, tornado outbreak. But yeah, that was about that. But as an independent contractor, I actually have about 55 cities that I do the forecast for. That's now with the Storm Report.
So what does that look like generating forecasts for all those places? And then at the same question for the Weather Channel, you just pulled from their, I guess, their daily or whatever package was, right?
Yeah, from the Weather Channel, we would use the National Weather Service forecast and also use, eventually they have their own data, so they generate their own forecast. So we would use that forecast, and all of it was from the Weather Channel brand. Mm-hmm. A lot of it was very easy to pull. We had some databases. I actually created some databases to make it easy for us to be able to go from city to city, because you're trying to sort through 25 cities with different in queues and out queues and forecast points and all that kind of stuff. So you're trying to keep it straight. I created something very similar for the storm report, where we start off with a National Weather Service forecast. They're there, they've got all their points together. And then from there, we do more of a nowcast.
Right.
Looking at the radar and all that kind of stuff. In radio, it's a challenge because you have maybe 15 seconds to try to tell a story that's engaging. And in the midst of that, you may be doing a long out cue and throwing in a commercial read. So it's like, how do you tell people what they need to know in 15, 20 seconds?
And a lot of them are well, again, Weather Channel and what you're doing now, a lot of them are recorded for some period of time out, right? How long is that?
That's right. For the most part, we'll do maybe 3 or 4 forecasts per day. Mm-hmm. So we'll do a morning, a midday, and then maybe a late PM and a night. Mm-hmm. During the weekend, they're okay with us doing like a day forecast and then an overnight forecast. Those can be quite challenging when you've got, something happening in the morning, right, and then it clears out into the afternoon. So you try to work on your timing, and you don't want to be working as for myself, I'm 24/7. I have on-call periods 24/7. And so I try to make sure I still have a life by, freeing up time and doing forecasts. And I like those quiet days where you can say sunny and that'll hold all day. So.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Aubrey, I hijacked the...
Those were great questions. And that was kind of the angle I was kind of going for is, I'm very unfamiliar with radio. All I know is I do 3 20-second hits a day. And you're right. How do you give the forecast in 20 seconds, especially when you have some big changes on the way? And is there any leeway, like during severe weather, are you doing small cut-ins like that? Are you given a little bit more time, or any sort of continuous coverage for a little time? How does that work?
Because there's only a few of us at the storm report, there's only 5 of us, and we're all in different parts of the country. We all work from home, and so that's the beauty of it. There's 3 of us that are dedicated to severe weather coverage on about a dozen radio stations across the country. They're not the easiest markets, though. We've got a station in Topeka, WIBW, for example, KMBZ in Kansas City. So these are huge markets that can get really going with the severe weather. And so between me and Dan, who's the owner, and then Steve in Colorado, we rotate around. They will take wall-to-wall coverage. So if that's the case, if I start at 8 o'clock at night, I could still be going at 2, 3 in the morning if warranted. We have different packages for the radio stations. They either some of them just want your recorded forecast. They want a meteorologist, and we brand ourselves as their meteorologist. It's not from the storm report. It's the KMBZ meteorologist. And so with that, we're part of their team. And so a lot of times they just want a different voice. They want a meteorologist to get the forecast to them. And then we want them to be able, if they want severe weather coverage, then that's a higher tier, type of a deal. But and we can only handle so much. If you've got Topeka, Kansas City, and Wichita and Joplin all going at the same time, then you've got 3 crazy people running around trying to make sure that they're on top of all the severe.
I have to say how I'm sure important that is, in severe weather coverage, is having that person on the radio, giving you those minute by minute updates for people that, maybe are traveling or truckers or whoever it might be going through that certain area, needing to know and just not having access to a television.
Absolutely. And it's a challenge to try to tell them, keeping in mind the people that are traveling, giving mile markers for where the storms are, trying to tell them where counties are, because what if you're traveling and you've never been through central Kansas?
Right.
So you may not know where Saline County is or that you're even in it.
Exactly.
So it's trying to explain those type of things and paint the picture for folks so they know, okay, what do I need to do? Is this even near me? And all that kind of stuff. And we have quite a few chasers that hear us too, especially in those areas of Kansas, and we, get their reports off of the National Weather Service chat or off of Twitter. And with that network, we can really let people know what's happening and, try to keep people safe, which is the ultimate goal.
Wow, it sounds like a completely, I mean, it's still broadcasting, but it's almost a completely different world from television. So that's quite fascinating. Take us back to 2011. What does that look like on radio, especially at such an active night like that?
It was to the point where at the Weather Channel, we had little booths. And so I had people bringing me water and just setting it inside the booth. I couldn't get up. It was constant. I had to turn the television off because I had to focus in on what I was saying and not watch the footage of, what people were saying and seeing the actual tornadoes. And so I turned that off. And for Huntsville, my most vivid memory was for the Coleman area. I had to report that there were people trapped at the courthouse. And I don't remember in all of my years of working in radio having to say those type of things, that people were trapped and all that kind of stuff. And by the time you got to 2011, information was really starting to flow more, where we were getting more details from emergency management and what have you. Kept going for several hours, and it got to the point where I'm in Atlanta, radio stations in Huntsville, and they said, Jen, we're going to have to go. We have to take cover, and you're going to have to run this by yourself. And so it was the first time in my life I actually was solo on the radio station, just talking, trying to give information, giving the safety information and what have you, until all of a sudden the ISDN line cut out and we were off the air. And it took a little while to get some reports from them, but I got some texts knowing that they were okay, but they were completely knocked off the air. And so at that point, my coverage was over. And then I turned the television back on and got to see what was actually happening. It was sobering, and just so difficult to see. But it was pretty busy, that's for sure.
I've actually been to the Weather Channel in the little radio booth. I went to school with Danielle Banks, and I visited her at the Weather Channel. So I've actually seen all the little booths before. That was, I think I visited her in 2009, because it was shortly after we had graduated.
I may have met you then.
It's very possible.
Yeah, that's cool.
Very possible.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about Tornado Talk and how that started.
Okay. So Tornado Talk started in 2016 as a podcast. Dan came to me. He's the owner of the Storm Report. And he's like, what do you think about this idea? And I'm like, sure. And so we just started noodling this idea about telling tornado stories. James was actually on episode 1 of Tornado Talk because we decided to start out small and do the Tuscaloosa tornado. And we had him on the first episode. And he actually joined us for a second episode to talk about the siren controversy. Should they stay or should they go was the title of the show. My role in Tornado Talk at that time was all the research, digging into the event, making sure we had the facts straight, setting up the interviews. And I did the interviews and recorded them. And then Dan did the script writing and put everything together. And then we both voiced it. And we created 36 amazing episodes that I'm extremely proud of. And they're all archived on our YouTube channel. About a year or so ago, Dan decided to step away. It was a lot to do this show. We were doing it once a week at the start. And then we kind of spread it out a little bit. But it was just a lot of time. And with him being the owner of the Storm Report, it was a lot. But I wasn't done yet. I was like, wait, I'm not sure I want to step away yet. I didn't want to do the podcast by myself because I was already doing enough talking on the radio.
Right.
So I started noodling, what did I want to do? And I started talking to a friend of mine, a recent graduate from Millersville, Brandon Molyneux, and he started helping me come up with this idea for a robust Tornado Talk website, tornado history website. Because that's what I fell in love with the story, with the podcast, was the story. What happened who was involved? What happened to the communities? Did they survive the tornado? Did they, how did people help each other? What were some of the oddities with the tornadoes? There were so many different things that I was learning. And so I came up with this idea to have a tornado calendar on this day in tornado history. And you click on the calendar, and when you go there, you have a set of maps and graphs that show you how many tornadoes occurred on that day. And then I wanted to focus in on at least one or two of those tornadoes and started writing summaries. And I started that November 13th of last year. Since that point, I've written at least one or two summaries every day. So we're up to about 400 summaries on the website, and the maps and graphs are all updated with 2017 data from the Storm Prediction Center. And those are all on there as well. And as time's has gone on here, it has just been, it's been neat to try to put these events together and put the summaries together. But man, I didn't realize how long it was going to take me to do it. Because sometimes some of these events are so in depth, and then you start looking at all the data sources, and there's some, discrepancies that you try to work through, and you want to try to get the story out. And then it's just kind of grown, especially over the past 6 to 8 months with some of the information I've been trying to really kind of hone in on. So that's where it all started. It went from a podcast to the website.
And this is, if you're watching us, if you're not listening to us, if you're watching us, this is what the website looks like. So what Jen was talking about with the calendar, and you can just click on a day. My computer's not super fast apparently right now. Oh, it's election day. That's why, because they're all on the election websites. But that's what it looks like. So, so what kind of traffic are you getting on Tornado Talk?
So, we grew pretty well with the podcast. We had, we kind of had a good base. I found that there's been more growth with the actual events. I think that because I've been able to do something daily and touch so many different areas, that I've been able to see a little bit more growth. Initially, it was all on social media, on Twitter and Facebook. We're also on Instagram. And we have our YouTube channel, but Twitter is one of our biggest ones. Not only do I post on the history, but if there is an actual event occurring, I don't go overboard, but I do post on it because it's history in the making. So everything that happened yesterday, if there was valid reporting and what have you, that could be an event I write on next year. So I try to keep folks updated. I don't look at it though as a website where I'm trying to keep people safe.
Right.
I'm just trying to let them know what's happening. I've noticed, though, in some of my latest website analysis that we're seeing more organic searches. So we're starting to see people Google maybe an event or look up tornado history or something, and we're popping up on some of the Google searches. And if you look up a tornado date on a Google search, you may actually see our website pop up. So that's kind of cool. What
are some of the coolest things you've come across with either writing some of the summaries or kind of putting this calendar together? I think the thing that's been neat for me is to see the personal aspect of it, is going back and if there's an event from 1957, like I was writing one for tomorrow, is an F4 out of Orange, Texas, and the event says 1 fatality. Well, I like to find out who died, though. I want to know their name, and I want to find out more details I want to give their life meaning. And the town, what part of town was hit? What are some of the buildings? And because those are people's livelihood, I want to find out more information about that. So that kind of became my focus. And so I've been trying to do that. One event that really stuck out to me in this regard was from October 11th. It was a 1954 tornado out of Franklin, Indiana, and it was rated F3. And, it was reported that 2 people died. Well, as I dug into the newspapers, which is the greatest source besides Thomas Grzoulis' Significant Tornadoes, I could not do these without that book. I found out that it was a 24-year-old woman who was about to have a baby. And they rushed her to the hospital, and her name's Colleen Williams. So I was able to find her name.
And so they rush her to the hospital and she dies, but they deliver the baby. And so, for a while you're reading through the newspapers and you're hoping, did the baby make it? But unfortunately, the baby died a day later without a name. Mm-hmm. And so it was just reading those stories. It makes it more, it's not just a statistic. She had a name and she, had a life. And so those are the things that are really kind of sticking out to me right now. And then just being able to go into some of the more meteorological things, like finding events that Fujita documented and some of his old maps and graphs. And I eat that up. It's great stuff.
You're telling me I love Fujita's old maps. I am working on getting copies in my weather center, and
that's awesome.
That's good stuff right there. Yeah. So, it kind of reminds me of Dorothy Gale from The Wizard of Oz, and how the author found her name from a tornado. I think it was in a newspaper. She was someone who actually passed away in a tornado, and that's how he came up with the name Dorothy Gale. It's kind of what that reminds me of that.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So talk about some other cool things, that you maybe have come across, different, maybe some untypical states or anything, non-tornadic states, something interesting.
There was an event out of, it was one of the largest outbreaks in Arizona. That was near the Flagstaff area. Can't recall the date, but that was not that long ago. I was writing on that one. I've done a few little hits on like a California tornado outbreak. A lot, I try to balance it out where, you pull stuff, but it's there's a lot in Alabama. There's a lot of tornadoes in Florida. There's a lot in the Midwest. I've had a lot in Ohio. And I ended up doing 5 write-ups for tornadoes in Virginia, as I mentioned at the Mid-Atlantic ChaserCon. So I've been trying to balance it out, but there are some hotbed areas, obviously. But probably the Arizona one was the most unique. And then I've run across, a couple of things where, because I love newspapers.com is where I get a lot of my info. That is great source. So if I get to pick a website, I'm picking that one for today, because that's awesome. But, the tornado, hit this cornfield and all the corn was shucked and, all the kernels were everywhere. Or, tornado hits this kitchen and the money on the table is still there. Or, the milk that was sitting on the table has not been moved. There's a lot of those that are documented. And when you go back into the 50s and 60s to read some of these stories, the way they wrote in those days was awesome, with the detail and what have you. So those are some of the things I try to capture as well with some, because I can go through and write the meteorological synopsis or whatever, but I try to stay away from that because I like to do the, more unique aspects of it and try to paint the picture of what exactly happened.
No, that's definitely pretty cool. You're right. Looking through some of the old newspaper articles, the detail just doesn't get any better than that. Tell us about the interesting story when you came to Virginia. Well, first tell us how you got involved in the Mid-Atlantic Chaser Convention, and kind of how you heard about it and why you wanted to be there.
Well, I went to the Indiana ChaserCon last year, and that's in Indianapolis, and got to meet a lot of great folks. And there I met Chris White, who led the Mid-Atlantic ChaserCon. And, we just hit it off, and, I'd known him from Twitter and what have you. And I had just started Tornado Talk at that point in this new form. And so I was kind of promoting it to everybody. And then, when he was noodling this idea, he came to me and he goes, you think you could make it out? So I decided I just took a leap of faith and decided to be a sponsor. And I'd never been to Richmond, so I added an extra day so I could go to kind of check out the town. And I went to the library and did some tornado research there. And so that's how I kind of got involved with the group. I enjoyed it. It was an amazing, and it was neat to meet folks from that area. And I have radio stations out of Lynchburg. So it's great to go to areas where you are on the air, because sometimes I've never visited some of these places. So it's good to kind of get a sense of the area.
And then tell us about your library visit when you were in Richmond.
It was great. It was, I was going to go to the museum part, but I'm like, let me go to the library first. And I ended up spending 4 hours doing tornado research. And I just got the the computer open and looked up tornado, and I ended up finding amazing diaries where from like some from the 1800s, the 1920s, where, letters were written, this horrible cyclone had gone through and it had knocked over trees in someone's house and all that, and had documented all this information. And so to be able to, for some of it, I was able to make a copy of it or take a picture of it so I could have it for future research and what have you. And just wanted to see, it's the hard part was trying to read their handwriting.
Yeah.
Because it's so flowy and trying to read all that. But taking that information and then comparing it to newspaper articles at that time, and also Grzoulis's book, and seeing if I could come up with a summary to put those together. I've been tackling a few more of the later pre-1950 tornadoes lately. I really enjoy writing about those, and because I get into be a sleuth and trying to figure out what happened. It's pretty cool.
Shoot, I just had a question. No, I forgot it. Hate when that happens.
It's called the lack of sleep. See, nobody sleeps in this business.
Right, exactly.
Jen, have you ever slept normally in your career doing weather? I mean, let's be honest. Nobody sleeps in this business.
No, I take little naps, and I tried to take a nap today, and then Aubrey wrote me and said, "Do you want to be on WeatherBrains?" And then I was wide awake and excited. And
Well, what are your hours with the radio schedule? I mean, people just think we work 8 to 5 or something. It doesn't work that way. What are your
5 o'clock.
what are your hours on a normal day?
On a normal quiet day, I'll do some work at night. If it's quiet, I can do a few forecasts at night for the next morning, because I'm not necessarily interested in getting up at 4. If I try to I have weather that's due in the 5 o'clock hour. If I try to get up right at 5 and try to do the forecast, I sound like a frog, and that's not going to work. So I'll do a little bit at night. I'll try to get up around 6:30 or 7, and then work a little bit. If it's really quiet, I can be done in 3 or 4 hours. It's the days where we've got a hurricane landfall and tornadoes, and then there's winter weather in the forecast and all that kind of stuff, and you're waiting for the new model runs or whatever, that I kind of break it up. And if I have, working from home is difficult, because then it's like, well, I'm going to get something to eat. Maybe I'll go take a nap. I got to go do something else. You find other things to keep you distracted. So I break up my shift quite a bit. Plus I do so many forecasts that my voice gets tired. So I try to break it up a little bit so I'm not working constantly, and it keeps it fresh that way.
So do you record most of these and just upload them to a server or use Dropbox or something? How's the logistics?
Yep. We record to, I've got a little frozen here. We record through Audacity, and it goes to Dropbox, and then we upload it to our Storm Report server. And then the radio stations pull that down, and then they play it on the air.
Do you ever go live on the air with them?
I do. I have a handful of stations that I'll go live. I don't do scheduled lives where I'm a part of morning drive time or afternoon drive time, but it's for severe weather coverage, I will. And for some stations, we're their dedicated meteorologists. So if it's going to be a tornado outbreak for Topeka, then I've got to be ready. And I have periods of time where I'm on call. And usually it's a 24-hour period.
Well, so I guess the most intense outbreak you've worked is April 27, 2011. What are some of the other ones that come to mind?
Since working at the Storm Report, we've not had a lot of outbreaks. I've had some big ones that I've watched in Kansas. The Chapman, Kansas tornado, I was on that one and covering that for Topeka and the Topeka area. And then there was the Bennington, they call it the Bennington 2.0. It was a beautiful, slow-moving tornado, and I was covering that for a station in Salina. And it was on the ground for an hour and a half, and I was on the air for an hour and a half, giving the next warning and the next warning. And, luckily, there wasn't a lot of damage with those. But we've not had a lot of major outbreaks since I started with the Storm Report. That 2011 at the Weather Channel was the last big one for me to cover.
Do you ever get a chance to go to meet these people that you work with at these radio stations? Because I dabble in this, not to the extent that you do, but it's like I've been on one radio station for 20 years. I've never been there. I've never met any of these people in person. I know some of their names, but it's like I feel like I need to go there and meet them sometime.
Yeah, I did actually. Our first year doing the Tornado Talk podcast, Dan and I flew out to Kansas because we have a lot of stations in Kansas, and he lives in Kansas City. So I went to Kansas City. I went to my station there, went right down I-70, went to Topeka, went to Salina, went to Hays, Kansas, came back through Wichita. And so it's neat to be able to do that. It really helps the relationships to be able to go and meet these folks. And I've gone to, I live in Ohio. And so I've actually went to the station that I'm not too far from where I live and met with those folks. And it really it kind of helps build the camaraderie, since I'm pretty much talk to myself all day. I don't talk to anybody. And so, it helps to be able to have that one-on-one time and FaceTime with folks.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll do some of these out-of-town radio stations, and somebody will figure out that they'll see something from me on social media or hear WeatherBrains. Wait a minute, that's that guy that does the radio here, and then they'll start to make that connection. But most people have no idea where I am, or that I'm sitting in a closet talking into this microphone, doing this radio station, that radio. It is a very interesting but odd arrangement here. But I've never had to do what you do. The one thing I do with these radio stations, I promise you'll get ththese recorded cuts, but I don't do anything live unless it's local here. Mm-hmm. And even if it's local, they have to take the TV audio from the TV coverage that we do, because when you're doing television, severe weather, you can't do severe weather for some radio station somewhere. So I can't do what you do. So, but it's interesting. What do you think the future holds for people that want to do weather on radio in the next 10 years?
Oh, that's a great question. It's definitely changing, and it has changed. Our competition actually is TV, in one respect, because a lot of folks are like, we'll have this partnership with the television and we'll just stream coverage. We have other radio entities that are our competition as well. But I think that when all is said and done, if you lose your power and you can't watch television, you can still listen to radio. And I think radio is an important communication source for big tornado outbreaks and what have you. And we can translate what's happening in a different way to really paint that picture of, if you're traveling or whatever. We're sitting here and we're dedicated to being able to do it. I think there's something about radio that, I don't think it's going to go away anytime soon. It definitely looks different, and there's more of a digital side. I have a radio station that I do some Facebook updates for, and there's been some requests for us to do Facebook Live as well. So there may be some aspects where we do radio, but we also get into some of the Facebook Live stuff, because there's, to be able to broadcast on radio, you have to be able to communicate and really paint the picture without a map that people can see. We have to try to get the map and the radar, and since they can't see it, we have to try to make it pictured for them. So
and I've said this many times. In our old colleague here, JB Elliott, Aubrey knows JB. He was with us. He's my mentor. But JB would do long form severe weather coverage on radio, and I always thought that was best instead of taking TV audio, because I'll be honest with you, and I'm cognizant that I'm on the radio, but still, it's not the same. When you're doing radio, you're painting these mental pictures. And it's just so different from doing television, because with television, you're referring to the video, and they can't see video on the radio. But when the power goes out, when everything else fails, commercial radio stations are still typically on the air. Most people have a radio and they can hear that. And I think it's just crucial. And I see a trend where it just seems like fewer and fewer stations are picking up like your coverage. So I think it's a great service you provide, and I think there's a future in it.
Well, thank you. Well, and a lot of these radio stations stream online. So if you still have power, or if you or have your cell phone or whatever, you could still maybe pick up the radio stations on their website or on their app. And so you can hear us, So if I'm getting ready to, let's say Dan's covering and I'm getting ready to take over, I'll listen to what he's doing. And he might be broadcasting in Kansas and I'm sitting here in Ohio and I'm, listening to him on the computer. And so I think there is a future for radio, and it's a neat service too, not only for the severe weather coverage, but to have that daily forecast and to, build we are building community with the cities that we're in and being a part of their local show. And I still think there's a local aspect to radio, even though there are some stations that have become a little bit more, they just do recorded shows or what have you. There's a lot that are gone back to their local morning shows and their local afternoon shows. So
what does forecasting for radio look like? How do you do that for so many different cities?
I cheat a little bit because there is so much to do that I always start with the National Weather Service forecast for their forecast point. So let's say it's Burlington, Vermont. I pull up that forecast. And then from there, I will look at model data and just do kind of an overview of what's happening. For a lot of what I do, I have a lot of cities that are kind of grouped in the same areas. And that's actually a good thing, right? Because then I can kind of look at them all together. I can look at Kansas City, Topeka, Wichita, Hayes, Salina all at once and see, okay, what the timing may be different, but it's the same weather feature that may be coming in to bring in the problems. And so you kind of look at it that way. And so I start there, and then it's all about the nowcasting trend, radar. What's the satellite look like? Is the fog going to clear? All that kind of stuff. And it's the way, depending on how many forecasts they need, it's how do I word that? Do I say showers ending? Do I have time to talk about how heavy the rain's going to be? And you kind of go from there on all that. But it's more, I think we do more nowcasting than anything.
Interesting.
I think nowcasting, I'm sorry, I'm just jumping back in on the Fox show here. I think nowcasting is really kind of, what's the word? It's the future, I think, for us, and underrated because the models continue to take over and do better and better and better. And the value we're adding in the short term is going to be much higher, I think, than looking out a day, 2 days. And then we start looking at 10 days and stuff like that. That's just kind of silly. So I agree with that 100%. Jennifer, what stations did you do in Dallas? Because I recognize your voice. It's just fun to sit here and say, oh, that's Jennifer that I heard for so many years.
WBAP. At the Weather Channel, I did there, right. And right now I'm on a Christian station, KAWA, which is a Way FM Christian station.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Cool.
Kevin, you ever been on WBAP radio before?
I can't remember. I don't think so. I think maybe there was one or two times. Well, no, wait a minute. No, we did overnights for years early on in TXCN. BAP scooped up a bunch of things because they had the Weather Channel, I think, and one or two other services to kind of keep them away from everybody else. But we had to do, Jennifer talks about the difficulty of recording, number one. But for the longest time, we had to do a 2-minute overnight trucking forecast that was done, I think, during the 8:00 p.m. hour, and was going to run until like 4 or 4:30 in the morning. And that was just ridiculous nonsense. But we did that for years when I was at TXCN. I should have just called Jennifer and let her handle that.
When I was in Dallas, this is back in the 80s. One of the competitors was Harold Taft on KXAS Channel 5. Harold was the legendary guy. Tell those guys to pipe down in there. We're trying to do WeatherBrains here.
They're kind of on TV here.
A bunch of ratchet jaws in there, blah, 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 blah. But anyway, Harold was the legendary weather guy in Dallas-Fort Worth. He'd been there forever and ever. But Harold would stay after his late shift and do the radio shift on WBAP, the Trucker Show. And I want to say the guy that was the host of that show was a guy named Ted Mack. And Harold worked the overnight shift. And he'd do the trucking news and the whole thing. And that just was an interesting culture back then. But back then, Clear Channel Radio was a big deal. I mean, I guess now with the internet and the XM and all these other things, maybe it's not as big as it used to be, but that would be kind of awesome. So, Jen, let me ask you this. I ask this for most people that come on the show. Let's say we have a young person that's a junior or senior in high school, and many of them that are weather weenies listen to this. What's some advice that you could give them if anybody's interested in being a weather communicator, a professional meteorologist that communicates the weather across radio, TV, digital, whatever. What's some advice you could give a young person?
I would say it's good to know your weather and to learn it, to learn all the big words that we learn in school, but to not necessarily use those on television or radio, because we have to remember who we're talking to. That if I say vorticity or something like that, it's going to take me longer to try to explain that than just to talk about spin in the atmosphere or what have you. You cannot talk about that really on radio unless you're in the midst of long form live coverage or something. So I think just being really good about how you describe what's happening. It's kind of looking at the big picture and trying to make it where if you're in the car driving, what would you want to hear from the meteorologist? You would try to keep a smile on your face, especially if it's a beautiful day, express that. If it's a crummy day, express that. I've done that where I'll be like, man, it's just not going to be the greatest day, sorry about, the rain or whatever. And you put your personality in there. I think communicating with your personality is key, and not trying to do, too much in terms of trying to get too scientific. I think we lose folks if we do that. And just be yourself. And when it comes to doing severe weather coverage, I've been often told, and I was told that not too long ago, that I sound like a mom when I'm on the air. That it's, now, folks, I need you to get into your sturdy shelter. Do not move. It's like, do not move, and or else, and I
stay there. You're not getting dinner.
Yeah. Exactly Stop hitting your brother. Stay on your side of the car.
Yep. Do not get out. Do not pass go. Just stay in your shelter. But when you're doing severe weather coverage, we have, and I can have a tendency to, especially things are happening, it's exciting and there's a lot going on. You have to stay calm and just, and that can really come across on radio if you're sounding panicky or sounding frantic. Have that calm voice, because people are going to hear you, and especially if you've established that relationship over years of being on the air. I have some stations that I've been on the air for over 20 years, with Kansas City, for example. They've heard my tones since the late 90s. And if I am like all bubbly, they know it's going to be a great day. If I'm like all of a sudden stern and really focused into my tone, then they might perk up and go, Jen's serious right now. There's something might be going on. And so I think just focusing it on that. And for radio is, I'll just have a conversation. It's hard to do in 20 seconds, but you can pull it off. And
hey,
do that.
Jen, run down your equipment you got in there.
It's
start with a microphone.
Yeah, pretty simple. I guess a simple
What
microphone.
kind?
Yeah, it's the Audio Technica.
Okay.
Mic, little pop filter, and that's it. And then I have what I use is what's called an icicle. Because the icicle.
Sure, blue mic.
And I don't know if it's going to show up here or not, which I think is very appropriate since we're weather people, that we have an icicle.
Yeah, I almost do you like that? I looked at that at one time, then I
do.
didn't need it.
It's fabulous, because the end of the microphone cable goes into the bottom of the icicle, and then there's a USB cord that goes right into the computer. And I record on Audacity.
Really?
Yep.
I love Audacity.
I love Audacity because it's free.
My gosh, I hate that software.
What do you use? I'm curious.
Well, at work we have to use Audacity. Hang on, somebody's coming to talk to me. I'm sorry.
So anyway, I use Audacity to record, and then that's it. We upload things to a server. We can either use FileZilla to upload the files, and we actually have an automation system that takes the files and puts it on the server. And that's about it. I have pieces of foam behind me here to capture the sound, and then I have my computer. I have two screens. That way I have everything up in front of me. I can run National Weather Service chat on one side with the radar side by side. I have the forecast up on the other side, and then I can talk right in smack dab in the middle. I can kind of keeps things going, because it's all about cranking out the forecast and being efficient, and getting everything out the door.
Well, let me go back to my original question about the young people. So you went to Penn State, right?
I did. Yep.
What's your advice on selecting a college for atmospheric science or meteorology?
I believe that you should only go to Penn State University. No,
Yes, bingo.
Penn, Penn State is one of the top meteorology schools, but there's so many out there. I think that if you're choosing a meteorology school, make sure it's well-rounded. The cool thing about Penn State was they have a radio area, a campus weather radio. So I got a little taste of radio there, and then campus weather television. So I could kind of get my feet wet on doing that as well. We had a working weather station, so we would go and I worked there, did observations every morning, and reported that to the National Weather Service. So I think if you're looking for schools, focus on what your interest is. Since my original interest was hurricanes, I was going to go to Florida State. But since we moved, I switched over to Penn State, and I fell in love with maps when I was there. That was my big thing, was drawing maps. I thought that was just fun. And so I think just finding out what your interests are and see where the school is strongest in their teaching. Is it, you don't want to do research? Do you want to be a forecaster? What are the strengths of the schools? If you want to do severe weather coverage, then would you want to focus more like Oklahoma? So those are the things I would look for based on what you feel your interests are.
And so for those that are maybe in college now, let's say they're freshmen or sophomores or juniors, seniors, whatever, in college in a meteorology program, what was your path to getting your first job? It seems like it's very competitive, maybe more than it was 20 or 30 years ago. Yeah. So many kids are graduating and the jobs are somewhat limited. There's not a lot of job growth within NOAA and the private sector. What's some advice on getting that first job?
Well, I was very blessed to have had a friend who I went to school with who worked at the Weather Channel radio network. She was the only girl at that time that was working for them. And she sent me a note and she gave me a quick call and said, "Hey, we really need women in radio. If you want to come, try this out." So sometimes it's just make sure you're networking. That is a huge thing right now, is making sure that you are, staying in touch with, people that you meet. Going to these chaser cons is a wonderful way to network. We met so many awesome kids from Virginia Tech at the chaser con, and they were just so excited about weather. Here they are networking with, people in radio, doing websites, doing research. David Hoadley, who's, the grandfather of all chasers. He was amazing to talk to, and they're networking. I think going to those type of events, going to events that your college might hold, whether it's your School of Meteorology, if they do some kind of a weather group, keeping the networking going there, and definitely interning somewhere. I interned at WNEP in Scranton, Wilkes-Barre area, and got my taste of whether or not I wanted to do television or not. And I've much preferred radio, that's for sure. I don't think I could have handled doing too much TV. You guys handle so much stuff that's thrown at you. And some of the grief that you get, I don't know how you handle it, but we don't get that in radio. We're kind of sheltered from
lucky.
Yeah, that's a lot.
It is much harder on Aubrey and women than guys.
I'm very
hard.
And I'm very blessed. I live in such a welcoming and great area that they respond to me so much better, and I'm very thankful because I don't know if I could do it in a different market if the dynamic was different with the community, honestly.
Yeah. So I think just being able to get kind of plugged in with things, and just I'm going to go back to the networking. I think that's the key part for these college students to, through Tornado Talk and with the Storm Report, we've worked with a couple of college students. One I found on Twitter. I loved his tweets. I thought they were just great. And I touched base with him, found out he was a Penn Stater, and we worked together. And then he put me in touch with Brandon, who turned out to be my map guy, helping me learn how to create all these maps. And so with that, they gave him skills to be able to take in the future. And hopefully, like right now, he is going back to school, but he's helping tutor in Python code. And he learned a lot by helping me by creating Python code to create our maps. So all that works hand in hand. You just have to work and look for opportunities to continue to grow and be well-rounded. If you want to be a communicator, take a communications class. take a public speaking class just to learn how to communicate and be able to tell that story of the weather. And especially if you can try to do it in 20 seconds and be engaging, that's a cool part of being able to do that.
That's tough too. I've got so many radio stations where I don't know what this 20-second thing is, but that seems to be the hip. That's like the hip magical spot. Some consultant somewhere. All your radio cuts need to be 20 seconds, and if they are, you'll be number one in all day parts. But I do a group in Tuscaloosa, and they've all got to be 20 seconds, and that's a challenge. For television, I get 3 minutes in some newscasts, some minutes, some newscasts 2 minutes, but that's a challenge. I mean, 20 seconds is not a lot of time, especially when the weather's really active. It's just tough. So Jen, you're much better than me at it. I'm not.
Oh, well,
I'm not a 20-second guy.
Well, and it's it's 20 seconds with an out cue, so you really only have maybe 16 seconds to tell the story. So.
I can barely say my name in 16 seconds.
I know,
no, listen, I have to say one of them, for the Steve Harvey Morning Show on 92.9 WTUG. That's like half the time. I mean, it's like, come on, man. But we have to stop here, y'all. We're going to take a break for Tony Rice, and we are going to come back with Weather Roundup. We'll talk about current weather and what's to come. A very interesting pattern, Aubrey, setting up for you. You're going in the deep freeze next week. This is great.
No, it's not great.
This is great. We're going to talk about that. We'll have picks of the week and a whole lot more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
With the end of daylight saving this past weekend, we've got a little more night sky to enjoy at a more reasonable hour for a while. And if the cooler temps and earlier sunsets don't put you in a wintry mood, the mid-evening appearance of winter's most famous constellation should. Look to the east, around 9 p.m. local, for Orion the Hunter. He should be about halfway up the dome of the sky by midnight. To the right, you'll find the constellation Taurus, highlighted by the bright star Aldebaran in the bull's leftmost eye. The story of this constellation group is an interesting one, originating in Sumerian myth where Orion, which translates to light of heaven, fought Taurus, the bull of heaven, though the Greek version of this myth is far less heroic. Drunken Orion was blinded by a king after the hunter got a little too frisky with the king's daughter. On Friday, look to the southwest just after sunset for a sliver of 2-day-old moon. About 7 degrees below, again low on the horizon, catch a glimpse of Mercury, with Antares just below and to the left. You might notice that Antares is slightly red, and it gets its name because it's often mistaken for the planet Mars. Further to the right, if your horizon allows it, you'll find Jupiter. Now, Jupiter may be a challenge to see, not just because of the trees and houses and anything else that might be blocking your view of the horizon, but mostly because of that low altitude. You're looking through a lot more atmosphere, which is why the stars look so much brighter when viewed directly overhead. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
Hey, Aubrey, you got time to do some email? Are we cool with that here?
Absolutely.
In that case, we're going to open up that good old email inbox and see what magic we can find.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
All right. So this one comes in from Jenny Pratt. Man, I must be tired. I can't see anything. All right. I love this outstanding podcast with no science background to speak of, but a lifelong fascination of weather. I have set out to teach myself as much as possible. And our show, believe it or not, our show is actually helping her. Can you believe that?
Keeping in mind, this is being read by somebody who said she can't see right now.
Yes, I'm just making it up as I go. I really enjoyed James Spann's pick of the week about the Saffir-Simpson scale. And so this is her layman's point of view. The hurricane rating system does need to be modified. Many people make their evacuation preparation decisions based solely on one number. Some will stay behind for a storm that's only a Cat 3. With this unfortunate truth about human nature in mind, the number generated by the rating system should be a reflection of total damage potential. Wind, storm surge, inland flooding, etc. If the storm is predicted to be catastrophic in any one or more of these categories, that it should be rated a 5. So that's some interesting perspectives. So Jenny, thank you so much for writing us. And I hope I read actually what you wrote. And actually talking more about hurricanes again, Chris Bovitz sent us a very detailed, he calls it a threat diamond, a proposal for a hurricane threat communication system, talking about the hurricane warning systems. And this is his proposal. If you could get this into the right hands for serious consideration, who do we know at the National Hurricane Center we could forward this on to? It's very detailed, and I haven't gone into it at great length, but it's a good proposal. To be honest,
it's really interesting when you start looking at stuff like that, and then you get into the F scale and the EF scale, and you reach this point where you say, well, what do? Do you blast and start again, or do you try and modify what you have? And I don't think there's a correct answer either way, because you're never going to get everybody on board.
Right.
But you keep looking. I mean, how many people outside of people listening to this podcast really understand that we switched from F to EF on the tornado scale? I would argue that it's fairly few.
Yeah, no one. And I can tell, honestly, living in Florida, it is the mantra of, I will only leave if it's above a Cat 3.
Right. And he brings up
no
a
matter
good
what.
point. Yeah, he brings up a good point. I mean, the distinction between wind effect versus storm surge or flooding effect probably has some merit. I don't know. What do you think, James?
Probably so, but it's a very interesting topic, and this is more, social science stuff.
Right.
Where's Kim? Where's Kim when you need her?
Right.
I got nice pictures of her new baby today, so I know what she's doing, and it's not this.
She's missing it.
Yeah.
Kim hopes to be back by the end of the year. She's on maternity leave, but she has a life and we don't. So there you go.
So a couple very interesting emails. So we appreciate that. If you want to send us your email at weatherbrains.com. We'd love to hear your suggestions, what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show, maybe a good topic, maybe something cool that you would like to see us discuss. That would be great. If you have a guest suggestion, we'll go ahead and send it our way. Email at weatherbrains.com. And don't forget to send us some contact information or how we could possibly find this person to see if they would want to be on this boring, completely worthless podcast.
Okay. Let's see if we can do
the Twitter and the Facebook.
Twitter and the Facebook.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
We are doing this show on the 6th of November, 2018. And again, we had a severe weather event in the Deep South last night, early this morning. We had one death in Tennessee, injuries in Tennessee. We had multiple tornadoes in North Mississippi, Louisiana, North Alabama. The SPC, all the surveys are not back yet. It's very preliminary, but I do think their enhanced risk will verify. But the pattern flip is coming, and all of a sudden, we're going to have the 800-pound gorilla monster eastern trough, and it's going to turn cold next week. Aubrey, how cold will it be in Harrisonburg next Tuesday?
So cold. Next Tuesday. Gosh, did we go 40s? I think we went 44, knowing very well that we could drop it into the 30s. And we're going to be cold on Friday, this Friday too, with the rain, and that's going to be a cold rain. Nothing better than a 42-degree rain.
I want us to come up with the next term, like polar vortex, or the next thing that catches, that drives all the cable news channels crazy.
Madoki El Nino.
What is that?
I don't know. It's some sort of okay, good. I'm not the only one. Apparently, it's a special kind of El Nino that could be developing.
Wow.
What'd you call it? Okie dokie?
Madoki.
Wow. We need to get somebody on the show who knows what that is. But this needs to be something made up.
I thought I missed something in class. I'm going, gosh, yeah. I don't remember Madoki El Nino.
we have to come up with the next thing. I mean, Didn't Jason Samenow coin Snowmageddon?
He did, and it was like the Snowtober. It was Snowmageddon, and I think the Snowtober for that big Halloween storm in 2011. So yeah,
Polar Vortex, of course, caught. Yeah,
that
we
was.
Need to come up with
I think that was what NBC News or something like that did the polar vortex.
Well, I mean, I guess it was kind of a thing, right, as opposed to being made up. But I just want us to do the one that catches. We need to be the next meme. What's that going to be?
Well, just make up something, Kevin, and we'll start spreading it. Come on.
Well, that's why maybe it's a version of Madoki. I'll have to. How do you spell it?
Or maybe we can come up with a name for like an East Coast trough, like the Devil's Dip.
Yeah. Yeah. Or we could modify Madoki. We could call it Domoki. Oh, it's the Domoki pattern. Oh my gosh! I can start spreading it now, WeatherBrains listeners. The Domoki is coming for you.
So it looked like Dan Satterfield had something to do with this jabroni thing. It's like, so I searched that term. The first thing you do is go to the Google.
Yep.
How do you spell it?
Satterfield first showed up here.
How do you spell it?
Modoki.
Yeah,
I couldn't even figure out what years the Madoki El Nino would be. So,
wow, look at this.
If it came out of like Japan, I think it came from the JMA.
That's perfect. See, because we got the polar vortex from Canada, and now we've got the Japanese are sending us the Domoki El Menino.
You know what? Let's just blow up Arctic Oscillation. That
was the other one. I couldn't remember the other one. Yes.
So Madoki is Japanese for same but different.
That's perfect.
It makes so much sense.
That's perfect.
Wow.
I think it's something like cooler waters off of South America. It's like the warm waters of the El Nino, but you've got cooler waters at some points.
Okay, so go ahead.
I was going to say, what causes the Madoki El Nino? It's
we have to attach it to something. There was polar vortex, right? So vortex is a thing. And then there's oscillation. So we need a term. This is what Jen said earlier. Don't use meteorology terms, which reminded me, you remember Steve Minium, of course, James. He was the news director that was foolish enough to be the first one to put me on TV. But I remember him way back in the day telling me, he said, it's okay to use a meteorology word every now and then because it lets them know that you know what you're talking about. So we need something, send an email, people. We need something like oscillation or vortex to go with Madoki.
So one of our listeners will come up with something good. We'll take the ball and one of our producers, one of our listeners. Yeah.
It's like the Madoki Helicity. That's your show title right now. Title of the show. Madoki Helicity.
Madoki Helicity of Bear Clinic Nature. There we go.
Oh yeah, that's good too. I like it. We need to get that website and get the hashtag going.
So,
but we need an abbreviation for it.
Oh yeah, no, it has to have
an
acronym. Right, exactly.
So, Kevin, what's the weather doing out there, man? What's happening?
Oh, I feel like there's an audio segment coming. I haven't done an audio bit in a long time. That's it. Madoki. Yeah, I got to get to work on. I'm going to produce it on Audacity. Not. I'm sorry. What did you ask me? I want to roll.
We're doing a weather roundup here. I mean, what's the weather doing out there?
Nothing. The warm front just came through here, and I'm looking on the tower cam. I can see that thin little layer of moisture, which will get pushed back by the approaching cold front. But we talked to somebody. Was it you that sent out that study a couple of weeks ago that said that Tornado Alley was shifting a little east, and we can verify that the last couple of years anyway, because it's just really quiet here.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And we have had already a good outbreak or an event, not an outbreak, but an event last night. But again, with this cold air coming in, that's going to shut us down for severe weather for a while. In fact, we're looking at widespread lows down here in the deep south in the 20s middle of next week. And our highs will be in the 40s. So it's going to turn awfully cold with that trough. But I've got to go across the hall here. But Jen, what's going on? You're in Ohio, right? What's happening up there? How cold will it be up there?
We'll be in the highs in the 30s next week. So we'll get some of that cold air too, but we can handle it. No big deal.
When is your first big snowstorm coming?
Well, there's a tease for a little bit of snow, like Thursday night, Friday, but I think it'll be mainly north and northwest of Columbus, maybe up toward Toledo and then over toward Fort Wayne. So that little corridor may see a little bit of snow, about an inch or so. So, but nothing huge. And then it gets kind of quiet into next week.
Okay, good deal. Well, let's do. By the way, I have to ask. I've had so many people ask Kevin. You allege you are canceling all of your social media accounts. You are terminating them. Is this true?
I did it. Yeah, I did it.
So you are not on the Twitter or the face bag.
No, probably at great expense to my career, but I just, I've nursed that idea along for so long, and I just got fed up. And then I went and watched those Frontline shows, and I just went, this is ridiculous. I mean, if you don't stand for something, where are you? So I did it. It's funny because Facebook, they used to, until, I don't know, 2 or 3 months ago, you would cancel your account and they wouldn't actually do it for 2 weeks. And then they extended it a couple of weeks ago to a month. And their excuse was that, well, we saw people who kept trying to log back in. Well, they're wanting to see if their accounts have actually been terminated or not. That's what's going on. But they want you to stew on it for a month and decide that you can't live without it anymore. What was really weird is I had an old page that I wanted to get rid of, and I tried to cancel that, and that was a week's time, I think. And the week went by, and I logged back in and I checked it, and it was still there. And it had been counting down every time I logged in. It's 4 days, 3 days, whatever. And then when the week passed, it was still there. I had to go in and cancel it again, and it was still there. And it told me it would be a week. And then I went in a third time and canceled it, and boom, it disappeared. So how
do you feel now?
I feel a little bit of loss for Facebook, because of the groups. I was in a couple of groups that I got great value from, but I know too many things. I feel good. I feel lost for the groups because there were some great friends in there, and I got a lot of nice. You know what I got the most? There were not a ton of comments, but I put on my profile and I wrote a blog post, but I got enough comments, and a great percentage of them were really genuinely saying to me, I would get off of Facebook or whatever in a minute, but I can't. Is what they said. My friends are there or whatever, which just kind of further proves it to me. Is like, wait a minute, what is going on here that you literally, they have you, like I said, I mean, it's indelicate, but I said it a week or two ago, they have you by the balls of your friends and family. And so now they can do anything they want with you. And I think that that's offensive, and I think it's wrong, and I think it's kind of dangerous. I don't want to rant about it, but to answer the question, yeah, I do. What are you showing my page? Jake's got my non-page.
Doesn't exist on Twitter.
Yeah.
That's the end of your existence.
That's right. I don't exist anymore.
So how does your employer feel about this? I mean,
well, nobody has said anything. Quite frankly, I'm not even sure they know.
They do
now.
Yeah. There's not a great Twitter is not much of a thing in this market, and there's not a great social media presence at this. They like to think that there is, but there just isn't in this market and at this station. So nobody has said a word about it. I'll put things on the station page if they want me to, but for now, I'm barely even doing that because I feel like I just know I've paid such close attention to this for such a long time. Aside from the privacy violations and the surveillance that they do, the things that they have done out in the world are really unforgivable. You look at what happened in Myanmar and what they do in the Philippines and what they did with regard to elections and the surveillance and the data gathering that they did and they continue to do is just really scary and offensive. But again, I don't want to rant about it.
Okay, so like in every newsroom I know of, they have a big monitor now with the live social media leaderboard on there.
Right.
Did they have that in your newsroom?
They did for a while, short time, and it just no one was paying any attention to it. So I think it actually went away.
Okay, well then in that case nobody cares then. But so many of these places, I mean, that's kind of like a big deal. I mean,
and that's part of the thing. I mean, you look at what Campbell Brown said to the journalists in Australia, not too long ago. She basically said to them, she denies having said it, but she said, look, Mark doesn't care about your numbers and doesn't care about your businesses. You need to do what we tell you to do, and something like she said, she'll be back next year trying to hold their hands, trying to get through it. That they're just holding everybody hostage. And where's the payoff for it, really? Especially in weather. Yes, it drives a certain amount of traffic, but they keep gnawing that away and they keep trimming that down. And there's no reason to go over the weather arguments here that we've had for years. It's just not a good way to distribute weather information. And when you combine that with the privacy violations and the surveillance, the shadow profiling that they do on you. Oh my goodness. And when the frontline, go watch the frontline shows. Did you watch them, James?
No, I just this week.
Is that ABC Frontline? PBS. Okay.
Yeah, no, it's on my list of things to do. And again, my problem is, and we do have, by the way, I have to tell a true story. Last week we ran long, or maybe it was the week before last. In one of these weeks I was doing it and we ran long. I looked up, I had like literally 2.5 minutes to get dressed. I had to change clothes and run over there. I was so anxious to get my dress shirt on. I ripped the shirt right here. Wow. I mean, it just ripped a massive hole in it. So I was kind of like, all right, but I put the jacket on. So I've got to get over there in time tonight. But yeah, we need to talk about that more at length because it is an interesting subject that does relate to weather. Yep. And there's a lot of questions but I give you this credit. You got guts and you did what you said you're going to do. And I love somebody that does that. I love that. That's awesome. So you got guts. That's all I can say. All right. So let's do picks of the week very quickly. My pick is the SPC National Severe Weather Database Browser. Online plot version 3.0, which is awfully cool. If you've never seen that before, the link will be on the website, weatherbrains.com. All right, Aubrey, what you got for us this week?
Mine is the paper from Catherine Prosiv on tornadoes in the mountains. It's from a couple years ago, but, we were at Mid-Atlantic ChaserCon and talking about it. And, I just thought it was appropriate, as we head into that secondary season.
Awesome. All right, Kev, what you got for us?
I think I said when I wrote that blog post, it's just the digital meteorologist. My most recent post was making the comment about I can't, how they've got everybody where they say they can't go away. What's like you just said, your problem is you can't go. Well, that's kind of dangerous, I think.
Very interesting read. All right, Jen, we have given you moments to stall, to think of something creative for a pick of the week. So go.
I'm going to go with, is it just a website pick or?
Whatever you want.
It can be anything you want.
As long as it has Madoki in it.
Okay. I will look up the history of Madoki on newspapers.com. That's the choice I'm going to pick. I could not, if you are a budding historian like myself, that's where you're going to find some wealth of information on newspapers.com.
And cool. I have a huge favor, Jen. If you could email that link to email@weatherbrains.com. Typically, Brian Peters does the show notes, and he's out on medical leave. So JP, who does that, will get that if you email it just to that email address, and that'll be in the show notes. So that's awesome. So I do have to run across the hall and do some television here. So Jen, thanks a lot. If people want to follow you, get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Well, the website's tornadotalk.com. We're on Twitter. It's tornado_talk. And then we're on Facebook, tornadotalk.com. And we're on Instagram. And all of our links to all of our social media is on the website. And you can email me to tornadohistory@gmail.com. I'm always looking for folks to help me do research or write a blog. So all you budding college students who want to do some writing, I've got some openings for you to help get some information out there. I'd love it.
Cool. Awesome. And Aubrey, your Instagram feed, so you got a great photos you're putting over there. Great.
Yay. It's WeatherObs, WXAUBS. It's a mix of weather and the bear and a little of me, but more weather and the bear.
No,
it's your pictures are great. It's so peaceful in the bear, and it just makes me happy. Instagram is a happy little place, Kevin.
It is a happy place.
You're not going there, but and I know I was one of the
I was one of the early on Instagram. I loved it when it was, not owned by Facebook. I had friends literally all over the world. I made photography friendships when it was just a place to show nice pictures. And that's the other thing I miss. I mean, I took some pictures on Sunday in the wind farms out in Harold with a wonderful sunset. And I kind of came back and I went, wow, I don't have anywhere to show these.
Kind of sad. All right.
Yeah.
Listen, I got to go listen to some politicians make a bunch of speeches here and wait for my little 30-second weather segment. WeatherBrains is on typically Monday nights at 9:30 Eastern, 8:30 Central. Live.bigbrainsmedia.com is where most people gather together to watch. But we know that most of you listen to the podcast version. So thank you for watching or listening. The email address, it is email@weatherbrains.com. We'll have the show notes up on the site, WeatherBrains site, weatherbrains.com. Can you tell I've slept 1 hour in the last 24 hours? We got to go. On behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend. God bless.
Hey, if you'll use Madoki on the 10 o'clock news tonight, I'll go back on social media.
All right. Thanks, everybody. That was awesome. Y'all have a great week.